Hey gang, Jane back with a different kind of crochet video today. This one is the first of a new kind for me, where I plan to get more into my creative process, such as color choices and where I choose to put them in the design, and give you a peek into my crochet journal. You guys have been asking about my color combos that I use in my granny squares. I love to grab my scrap baskets and spend the evening coloring with yarn. When I asked recently in a community post, you guys asked to see the specific colors, the names, and the brands, and you wanted them in video form here on YouTube. So I'm going to start adding these color journal videos into the mix. Today, in this first video, I'll be sharing 5 squares with you. And remember, you can find the links for the tutorials for these squares in the description below. So I'm going to show you a full color pic of the square. I'm going to list the colors I used with the brand info in each of the particular squares. And just a side note, I'm not sponsored by any of these brands, so I use these yarns because I like them. And they have the colors I want, they're easy for me to get my hands on, and they're affordable. Keep in mind, brands change their colors often, so some of these may no longer be available, but they give you somewhere to start. Today's mix will be a random pick of squares, but some weeks I'm going to focus on one color palette done in different squares, and other weeks I'll pick one square and use various color palettes for it. And then some days I'll just mix it up like today. This is kind of a real reflection of my creative process because every day is different. I often don't know what will come up until I sit down with a box of yarn beside me and a hook in my hand. So let's dive into today's combo. So our first square is Adelaide. This one's a really popular one with you guys, and it's done in a nice autumn tone or maybe holiday colors. So I've used 5 colors for this square. The first one is called Putty, and that's impeccable. I get that at Michael's. That's my neutral. The next color is Sphagnum, which is a moss green, also impeccable. The third one is Topaz, nice gold color from Bernat SuperValu. The fourth one is Redwood Heather, also Bernat SuperValu, nice fleck in that one. And my final color is Caramel Bernat Premium, a nice amber color. So the order of colors that I do in this square is round 1 is the Putty, a nice neutral I started with in the center. Round 2 is the moss green, I'll call it that because it's easier than Sphagnum. Round 3 is the Topaz, and round 4 is the Redwood Heather. So those 3 colors are very short rounds, so they blend together nicely. The next round, again round number 5, is going to be Putty back to my neutral. And then round 6 is a bigger round and I have Caramel in there. Then round 7 is a nice border round. I use the Sphagnum moss green color. And then round 8 is the squaring round, and that one I do in my neutral color to frame the entire piece. Then we have round 9, 10, 11, and 12. Those are the borders. So 9 is the Redwood Heather. It's the widest one. And that leaves round 10 with Caramel, round 11 with Sphagnum, and round 12 finishing off the entire square with a neutral. So your colors kind of tie into each other and you keep pulling them out of the design as you go further outward. The next square I'm going to show you is called Sweet Pea, and it's a hexagon shape this time, and it's done in a nice palette of blues. So we have 4 colors today. The first one is Blue Mist, and that's impeccable. The second one is Putty. I use this as a neutral a lot, also impeccable. The third one is called Soft Taupe, also impeccable. You can tell I have a Michael's close by. It's actually like a 5-minute walk from my place across a nice park. So I kind of use it as an excuse to stay fit, but really I'm just stocking up my yarn supply. And the fourth one is Teal Heather, and that's Bernat SuperValu. It has a nice fleck in it. So the rounds that I use for this one. Round number 1, I use the Blue Mist, so the lighter of the 2 blues. Round 2, I go to my neutral, which is Putty. Round 3, I stay with a neutral color, but it's a little deeper, so that's the Soft Taupe. Then I go back to round 4 as my Petals, and that's going to be in my neutral, my Putty. Then we move on to round 5, which is also Petals, and I do a contrast here because I use the Teal Heather in that space. Then we have round 6, which is a nice little border, and I do that in the Soft Taupe. And then we're back into Petals again on round 7 with the Blue Mist. That's the lighter of the blues. And then the last 2 rounds create a border, which I use to pull out colors from the main part of the square. So round 8 is done in a neutral Putty, and then round 9 is done in the Teal Heather, which pulls out the petals from round 5. The Putty and the Soft Taupe both work as neutrals that give breathing space to the blues. So I can use two blues that are close in shade because I break them up with these two neutrals, but because I have two different neutrals, it gives a little more depth to the design. So next up we have the Sand Dollar Squared, which is an octagon shape that I squared up into a regular granny square. And the color palette is similar to the last one. It has 4 colors. First one is Putty, Impeccable. You'll see that one a lot. Second one is Mallard by Red Heart with Love. This is definitely one of my faves. It's a very rich blue. The third one is Topaz, and that's a Bernat Super Value. And the fourth one is Clay, Bernat Super Value, and it's a little deeper than the Putty. So the rounds that we have for this one, again, I start with a neutral, and that's the Putty. And then I move right into a dark color. So I go to the Mallard, which is the nice deep turquoise blue. Next, I have a small accent round that I use the Topaz for. And then we move into the 2 petal rounds, which are round 4 and round 5. So round 4, I use Putty, and round 5, I use Clay. So that gives you kind of a monochromatic look because they're so close in color and they're both rounds for petals. So it kind of gives it a cool look. Then we move into round 6, which takes us back to the contrast. It again is like a border round, and I use the Mallard for that to kind of echo round number 2. Then we move into round 7, which is the Putty. This is the squaring round, and it gives the frame for the octagon. Round 8, 9, and 10 are border rounds. So round 8, I use Topaz. Round 9, I use Clay. And round 10, I go back to the Mallard. I almost always finish off my squares with simple border rounds because it echoes the colors that are in the design, and it lets me pull them out and kind of complete the look by mirroring any colors that were in the design already. The next square we're going to do is Wispy Willow, and that's actually the next 2 squares, the last 2, and they're going to be in holiday colors, Christmassy colors, so different versions. So we start with the 4 colors that we're going to use. First one is Putty, Impeccable. The second one is Burgundy by Red Heart Super Saver, and it's a nice rich red. The third one is Winter White by Bernat Super Value, and it is a soft white, not a stark white. And finally, we have the Sphagnum, which is also Impeccable, and that's a loops and threads, but you find them at Michael's, and it has a nice golden tone to this green. So I will be using these same colors in the next square, but here's the order that I used for this particular one that you'll see on your screen. Round 1 starts with the Putty, and the Putty is it's a neutral and it's an off-white, but it's a little beigeier than a regular white. Then I moved on to the Burgundy, so there's a bit of a flower look there, and I used the Burgundy for that. Then on round 3, I went to the Winter White, and that also has a bit of a flower, but it gives a nice frame to the red flower. Then on round 4, I went to the Sphagnum, so that gives it's a very thin border round. Round 5, I went back to the Putty just to give some breathing space between this round and the next round. And then on round 6, I went back to the Sphagnum. So round 4 and 6 kind of work together, if you know what I mean. And the round in the middle just gives a little bit of breathing space. And now we're going outer towards the outer edge. The last round did some squaring, and now we're going to go ahead with more of that border. So round 7, we go back to Putty. Round 8, we use the Burgundy to pull out the flower in the middle. Round 9, we go to the Winter White. And round 10, we go to the Putty. So the last 2 rounds that create the border are again that monochromatic look of the white and the Putty together. I like to play this monochromatic thing with my neutrals because it gives it a little more depth and a little more texture without being busy and taking away from the main part of the design. So by using 2 very similar whites, I can still create a little bit of pattern in there without it taking away from the beautiful reds and greens that are in the design itself. And now we have our final square, and it's the second version of the Wispy Willow, also done in the same holiday color scheme. So we have the same 4 colors that we had in the last square. The first one again is Putty, and that's Impeccable. The second one is this nice rich red, which is a Burgundy by Red Heart Super Saver. The third one is White, the Winter White by Bernat and Super Value. And the fourth one is Sphagnum, and that's by Impeccable. Now we're working with the same 4 colors and the same square as the last one, but they're going to be in a different order for this one, so it creates a different look. We start with the putty, our neutral, in the center. And this time, round 2, we go to the winter white. So we have a white flower in the center instead. And then on round 3, we go to the burgundy. So you've reversed those 2 rounds from the last one. So now the white flower sits and is framed by a red center. Then round 4, we used putty. And round 5, we used the sphagnum. Those created a border. And then round 6, we go back to the putty. So the same idea as the last one, where I used round 4 and round 6 together. And then round 7 was a framing with the burgundy. And then round 8 was the sphagnum. Round 9 was the winter white. And round 10 is the putty. Again, that monochromatic border on the outside. When I'm making my blankets, I like to use this idea of taking the same square in the same color palette and just shifting them around in a different order and maybe making anywhere from 2 to 4 combinations of it. When you take the square and desaturate it, you'll see the values. That little value trick I showed you in the last video, you'll see how it can make the square look different. So if you're looking at it from a black and white, you think it's a different square. But really, it's the same square, you've just moved your colors around. So that's a really cool trick when you're making blankets. So there you go. That gives you a little peek into my color journal and my thought process. Hopefully this helps inspire you to play with more color and use these as jumping off points to try your own color combos. Let me know in the comments if this is something you'd like to see more of. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a thumbs up. And remember to subscribe to my channel so you're sure to catch all my tutorials as they come out. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.